Good evening. My name is Althea Wasow, and I'm so thrilled to be here with filmmaker Theo Anthony. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to engaging with this stunning and thought-provoking film together. My first question has to do with when you started this project. How would you articulate what that project was? And how did you change? How did your thinking change? And how did the project evolve? And kind of what were some of the key turning points that transformed what this project became?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. It's really cool to be out here, and this is really amazing theater, and I've had a great time being here, so thank you. I think my films always start from, I'm just like a really naive place of just being drawn to something and wanting to learn more, and I think the key to my films are that they are like a messy documentation of me learning about something for the first time, really, and all of like my stumbles and dead ends and sort of tangents. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the essay film form, is that it's this container for that, deeply personal encounter with the world. So this film, I think, has its roots. I lived in Baltimore for a long time. I'm from Maryland. I was living in Baltimore. I had worked as a journalist, traveled internationally for a while, and was really used to going to distant places to tell other people's stories without like really questioning it. In April 2025, Freddie Gray was killed by police while in custody, and Baltimore all of a sudden became this epicenter of this conversation around police brutality, and I was like my own backyard. And in the midst of all those protests, I learned about body cameras for the first time. I think there was like a Baltimore Sun article about it, and I thought it was really interesting because I thought here was this thing that was being called on by both protesters and police unions. And I thought that this is like so strange that in the midst of all this division that we're agreeing on this technological solution to a problem. I started this project thinking that I wanted to go there and learn everything I could, and the project sort of became this deep dive into body cameras. I think this was in 2016, so they were still like relatively unknown. And then I kind of had this naive idea that it would be like this history of vision or something like that. That's like how naive it was, and what a stupidly big project, you're going to always fall short of. I was like bouncing around, and then 2020, George Floyd's murder just thrust body cameras to the front in a way that was, we had been on this beat for a long time, but just sort of like added this intense pressure to not only get the story right, but also have a deeper reflection about like my own personal eye gaze in all of this. And so I think that was like the sort of another major key turning point for the film, which I think is worked over and addressed in the edit itself.
The one question that comes up again and again when I encounter this work is if you could talk a little bit about why it was important to you to include this kind of long history. You're bringing our attention to violence on Black people's bodies and encounters with police and police brutality. And there's many people that would think that there's no way that the solar parallax in 1874 or pigeons, why was it important to connect Freddie Gray to a kind of longer history of vision?
Yeah, I think very early on, I made a rule for myself that there would be no explicit images of violence in this film, that we wouldn't see any images of police brutality within the film. Those are images that we see like every single day on our feeds. So we all know what those images are, and they're so traumatizing that I don't believe in, the necessity of re-traumatizing audiences for the sake of proving that a traumatic thing occurred. When we're attuned to paying attention to the trauma within the frame, or the violence within the frame, it's the brightest thing in the room. And when you stare at the brightest thing in the room, you lose, all the shades of nuance and of the entire context and environment around it. So, I mean, literally, and this, speaks to the eclipse as metaphor for the film. I think by literally like sort of blotting out the brightest thing in the room, it throws into relief all these other histories, far-reaching connections. And I think, as sort of the film shows, and you've pursued in your work as well, there is a very clean line between a way of seeing the world as distant, as attached, as a commodity, as an object to be measured, controlled, known, and the ways in which policing also sees bodies as, objects for control as well. So I think that drawing that line, from this place that we can all sort of, follow along with our curiosity and show, how it reaches its tendrils into the present moment, I think was really important to understand, like, this is how we got here. The violence and a whole lot of other stuff happens, before we get to that traumatic event.
The one thing that we were talking about, and I just want to share before I move to my next question, is I just so appreciate the respect that you have for your audience, and that it is not a didactic film that seeks to illuminate and is problematizing the kind of desire or value of transparency as some things speaking for themselves. So I just really appreciate that. The next question I wanted to ask comes back to your comment about the essay form and essayistic practice, and even thinking about a kind of how to approach vision and violence and production of bodies and modes of relation and modes of apprehending the world the way the state sees or the police sees, the way the police see. Why did you choose the form and shape of this film that you chose? There's different ways, different approaches you could have taken, and so I'm interested to hear about the structure.
Yeah, no, I mean, essay, when I first started making my first film, Rat Film, I just was like, I was just going out with a camera and just shooting stuff, and like I liked 3D animation, and so I threw some 3D animation in there. I shot this portrait, and I sort of glommed a bunch of things together, and then I like finished the edit, and I think I showed it to someone, and they were like, "Oh, it's like an essay film," and I was like, "Yeah, I guess I made an essay film." And I think like since then, I've like sort of been able to like situate my my lineage definitely much more in this essay film tradition. Not in that it's like a consistent form in any way, but the only consistent thing it shares is how heterogeneous its output is, and that I think it is such a generous container for all of the different encounters that one wishes to have with the world in a visual media. An essay film can contain text, but a text can't be a film. A film can be a 3D space, a 3D video game, but a video game cannot be a film. Like there's just this, even in this age of, I think, of like generative media and generative like AI and stuff like that, there are things that the film will always hold and it, as an intentional medium, as a translator of these different experiences, you know, both physical and, you know, digital, that I think is just still endlessly interesting for me. So for me, like, as someone who is on my smartphone reading an article, moving to an internet tab and reading another article, answering a phone call from my brother, and then switching to a documentary on the Criterion channel, it's like that is already like this multimodal, like extremely experimental media experience, you know? And I think that like my editing and the way that I put together these films is like actually just trying to replicate the experience of what it's like to be alive in a media dense environment in 2025. I think like, I always like bristle when people like say that like experimental film is, or experimental art in general is like unapproachable, when it's like, you just have like this thing in your pocket that you're going from like visual, like 30-second reels, like which have no correlation with you. Like you are so attuned to jump cuts in your everyday life that you just don't even think about. Like if you can sort of like pause and think about that, and you know, suddenly the world becomes so incredibly rich with like potential to be worked through in the essay film form. So yeah, it's like, it's a way of, yeah, I'll leave it there.
I mean, I liked when you talked about the kind of departure point, not only of body cameras, but I mean, as you put it, we might beg to disagree, but your own naivete and kind of research process. And so it just, this kind of process of learning. I wanted to hear more about Axon and this kind of starting point of body cameras as a line of inquiry. How did you build a relationship with them? How did it grow? How did you approach shooting those scenes, and to hear a little bit more about that relationship and access?
Yeah, no, I think Axon, when I approached them, was still like a relatively new company that was doing a lot of media and putting themselves out there. I think they were riding this wave of, you know, lots of VC capital, a lot of, you know, this sort of nascent BLM movement that they were sort of positing themselves as like this, or positioning themselves as like this safer alternative to guns. And, you know, and also there was a big Obama era DOJ decree to like sort of bring in the body cameras. So they were really open to doing a lot of media. So they produced a lot of media, and I watched a lot. I watched like everything that they put out. Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, honestly, it comes down to that like respect thing that, you know, even if I disagree with you on camera, it's like so easy to just make someone look stupid on camera. You just have control of the edit. You're shooting them, like they can't see what you see. It's just, no matter how, like, it is not a symmetrical power balance with the camera. And I think like we cannot escape that. So what I do is I try to spend as much time trying to understand the person, to prepare ahead of time, to figure out how to elicit the best performance that I can. And I think that like I'm very transparent, that I'm not drilling into sort of hidden biographical details that I'm gonna like squeeze out of you under the limelight. That's just not my, you know, gotcha approach. It's just not like, yeah, what I do. I just think that there is truth in performance and truth in artifice that you can use, and in a more ethical way. So for me with Axon, I studied everything they did. I watched all their commercials. I read every interview that Steve had done. I know which beats he hit. And you can go online and search Axon Tour, and you can see the same exact tour that we did, just shot in a different way. And you know, when you look at that as a filmmaker, that's location scouting. If you can't get into that place, like, you know, so I'd never been in that place, but I knew that there's the airlock doors. I knew that there was the eye scanner, and I knew that you walk up the stairs, there's going to be that Star Trek catwalk, like where he's going to say the line about transparency right underneath the black box. Like I knew that architectural detail. So like me and my cinematographer were talking like, okay, like one single long tracking shot entering in, MTV Cribs style, like come on in, like we're gonna take you on a tour. And he's done that, and all of a sudden he's comfortable in that mode. We're not doing anything different than anyone else has done. I'm not like prying him, and like I feel okay doing that because it's like it's not anything different than anyone else has done. And he's just like saying all these lines. So again, and that sort of goes with the decision to use the long takes. I think like I didn't want to be accused of like chopping it up to make him look stupid. That was, we did 2 takes of the tour. We did, one zip through of the C-suite, one zip through of that second floor into the transparent doors through the factory assembly. We did that twice. The first time was like 24 minutes and the second time was 25 minutes. So he's like, he knew like all of his marks. And I love working with people like that, like who just are leaning into that, are comfortable with that performance. I think it comes down to like, it's a judo move where like you come at me with force, I'm not gonna like resist you, I'm just gonna use your weight against you and redirect you in another way. And that's, I think, how I deal with power in my films.
We'll have to, that's gonna be written down. It's a nugget of wisdom. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna translate that. I'd love to hear more about, there was just a point that you made I wanted to come back to with the, we were talking about it, the Axon scenes, you keep in the community organization scenes that are shot completely differently and are charged and unpredictable and kind of open up things that are really different from the rest of the film. And I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about that sequence and what you thought about in post-production and editing and how it impacted your project.
I think that, I've neglected to, in your first question, I think speaking of like milestones in the project that's really changed, like the night we shot that, it became a very different film. Like it was like very clean and controlled, like just, okay, modular shoots. And like, as I've just said, I spent a lot of time preparing, like just not so I can control everything, but so I can be prepared for the unpredictability of being out in the field. But yeah, the backstory for that is we were filming with Ross, the spy plane guy, and he'd already agreed to film one day where you're sort of giving a walkthrough of the program, and that's like all I wanted. I just was like, if you could just be sitting there, like on your computer, spying on the city, that's great. But he's like, I'm doing this community session, in West Baltimore, if you want to come. And we're just like, it's like not really what I do. I just like don't show up with a camera in places. And we're just like, but we were also like, you're showing up a lot for us. So like, you obviously want to be filmed in this situation. And yeah, it was just me and my producer, Jana. And it was, it's like it's a all-black church 2 weeks away from where Freddie Gray, or two blocks away from where Freddie Gray was picked up by police and was killed in the rough ride. And there's been journalists like coming and telling stories and extracting like these headlines and feel-good portraits and stuff for years, but like for what? And so people are sort of streaming into this meeting. They see Ross up there, white guy, and then me and my producer jhana who are also white, you know, with a camera, and like very rightfully assume like that we're with Ross, you know, and like in that moment, you're not going to be like, no, we're like experimental doc filmmakers actually, and we're like, we have the moral high ground here, and we just rolled with it, and you know, there's that moment, and I mean, I haven't seen the film in a really long time, so I forget who, but like, you know, it's the Haitian man, and he turns and he's just like, and you got cameras in here, not consenting to be filmed. We're like, oh my gosh, like we're in this. And I think like, I realized sort of on reflection that impulse to be like, no, like we're different was like more for me, and sort of like justifying like why I was there and feeling good about like my presence there than like the benefit of anyone in that room. And so I think in editing that, it took a really long time. It is a section that is entirely different, as you pointed out, stylistically. It's the longest section in the film. It demands a different sense of time. It's like the first scene is like 12 minutes. The second one is like 7.5, 8 minutes. And all the other scenes are like 3 to 6 minutes, right, which is like how I chunked them out. So in the same way that like I wasn't in control that night, like I tried to give space to the people in that room to like take back over my film a little bit within it. And a huge part of that was to not reduce in any way. And I mean, there's that paradox of editing. Anyone who's an editor will know of like, you have to distill, but you can't reduce. And that's really, really difficult to find that balance. And we were talking about Frederick Wiseman and how great he is at that. But yeah, there's, you know, 12 or 15 people in that room, and you were saying like, I've been every single one of those people in that room. And I think that means so much, because like, it means that I did my job of like saying, no, that's not like an aggrieved black church, you know, in West Baltimore. That's not like, you know, an angry black room, you know, which was like my fear being in a place like that. It's like, no, that's like 12 to 15 different people who are like tired as shit of like having to tell their story to the camera and justify why they're in need of like material support. And, you know, who are you to try to like tie a bow on it and take it, you know, to some, you know, festival or something like that, you know? So that's what I was contending with. And the disjointed, opaque form of those sections reflects that encounter.
There's so many elements even of those two extended sequences that you could have cut out that would have taken out the kind of different critical and reflexive layers in it and provocations in it. And so it's just so thought-provoking and affecting and brilliant, the kind of challenge, both to the juxtaposed with the other elements and to you as a filmmaker and to us as audience members. Have you had any screenings where people connected to that community center have seen it or seen the film, and any kind of back and forth or connection?
Yeah, no, I think definitely that scene, along with the final prologue sections, always prove to be like the spiciest part of, you know, like the conversation of just like, you know, in that they provoke the most like reactions to like, you know, trying to figure out my intentionality there. And yeah, it's always really great discussions, and you know, I'm always love to hear when people, it like resonates with people, and I'm always interested to hear when it like doesn't sit right with folks. I think as an artist, as a filmmaker, I'm not, again, you're trying to make something that's of a time but transcends the time in which it was made. And I think a huge part of that is leaving the film in open system to allow the context of the present moment, whether it's 2021 when it was released, or 2025 or 2035 when hopefully people are still watching films, like, you know, that the text is always living and it's always growing. And so I'm always so interested in hearing those reactions, because I can kind of like index like, oh wow, like where are audiences at right now? Like I remember, like, you know, in really some contentious in screenings, like in maybe more like activist like circles, people are like, you know, why didn't you go further with this? Or like, why is this? Like what? And it's like, and I'm like, oh, interesting. Like you want to instrumentalize a film for this end. And to that, I'm always just like, so instrumentalize it. go use it. Like that's the power of like these working together. But like, I think it's actually more effective if it's open, and a film is like this open, you know, there's a lot of different entrances, a lot of different exits, and you know, you gotta let it change over time, because the ones that are so tightly controlled and have this like dogmatic like takeaway message don't always like stand the test of time, because they're so of that time. And yeah, you know, so it's I always love reading and hearing, you know, where the world's at in response. So
I mean, to me, it's so important that the history and the philosophy and the kind of critical work in the film is, you're not separating, oh, the community center, the people on the ground. That's different from Etienne Jules Marais and astronomers and measurement and data and questions of vision and power. Like people are engaging these questions at a high level, and it's not, you can't just have a divide. And so I just appreciate how you're juxtaposing and bringing those kind of history and politics and aesthetics and vision and power together. We're going to turn it over to for 3 or 4 questions from the audience. I know there will be many good ones, and please look for a Carsey-Wolf Center person to help you with a microphone, and we look forward to Theo will answer your questions.
Hi, thank you so much for your film, and thank you for both of you for this awesome Q&A and discussion. I'm curious about just hearing you talk about, you know, your thoughts on the snap, or you know, your presence as a filmmaker in various spaces, and just thinking about the moments in the film. I'd just love to hear you say more about this thought of your presence as a filmmaker in these moments when you, I think, are contemplating about surveillance, and like, you know, you're actually filming people, and then actually filming yourself, including footage of yourself in the film. So I just would love to hear more about this idea of your presence in the film, your thoughts of this as reflected in the choices that you actually made in the film itself.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, I think at like the sort of very top level, I was like, I'm making a film about body cameras, but like that operates on this like myth of the neutral observer, you know? And if I didn't also address my own myth of like a neutral observer in this, I would be like hypocritical at best. And yeah, I think that I was using, especially like in those spaces, like in the police spaces, like in Axon, there's like again, like that sort of like judo move, like where like my whiteness, like I think does grant me access into a lot of those places where like I'm, okay, how do I use that to then sort of like get to the core and tell a more interesting, honest image like about that. And so I think then if you then also aren't honest about who you are in that process, I think that ultimately it's a disservice to the project. Yeah, I think that like that moment of the community meeting, just, and obviously like living through the last like 10 years of just this serious like reappraisal of like the myth of objectivity and like the real damage that like you know yeah, that myth of neutrality has done to society. Yeah, I don't know. I just it took a more autobiographical turn, I think, like where it literally opens with this image of my eye, where I think I needed to make clear from the very beginning that this was this journey inwards simultaneous to this journey outwards. Yeah, I just felt like this excavation of a lot of my own self that like isn't even necessarily in the film, but like we were talking about this before, like oftentimes when you're making something, you use all this language to describe or, to justify what you're doing. And sometimes it's really interesting just to take that language away and see what remains. And I think there's a lot of language in this film. There's a lot more that I took away. So, yeah.
Thank you for the film and the Q&A. The question is regarding the relation, if there is one, between this and the prior subject to review. I feel like they tackle, I was actually just speaking about it with my brother earlier, a lot of very similar issues, and you mentioned earlier this perhaps naive mission to track down vision and everything related to it, and I feel that that film does some of that as well. I wonder if these were produced in conjunction or really just what the history of those two, if there is a relation there.
Yeah, no, thank you. He's referring to a film that I made in 2018 called Subject to Review. It was made for ESPN 30 for 30, and it's a film about because it's not really, but it's about the history of like Hawkeye, like instant replay in tennis, and how it became this like broadcast aid spectacle and incorporated as like this own sort of like judge, jury, and executioner on the tennis court. I made that film at the same time as this, and I always think of that as like a overgrown appendage of this film, where it could have gone in, so I was making these simultaneously, reading a lot of the same material. That film is also about the myth of objectivity and how, the view from nowhere often obfuscates the person who benefits from that illusion. And I think that is true with body cameras, and it's true with tennis, so, which is just a sports betting, instrument. So, yeah, to settle lines. But anyways, won't talk about a film that most people haven't seen, but they were made at the same time.
Thank you so much for this. I had a somewhat self-interested question. I've also tried to access police training moments, and I've always been politely refused. So I kind of want to know what the secret sauce was to get into that training event. And then I love the bibliography as well at the end, and I just wanted to hear more on the decision to include that and if that's online anywhere.
Yeah, no, thanks for the plug. So the bibliography's online. I always love to plug this, so thank you. You're a plant, you're a hire, your invoice is in the mail. We made a website called All Light Expanded, that alllightexpanded.com, and it's like an interactive bibliography for the film where we like worked with this incredible design team there's like a video on the film on a website that you can scrub through the entire film, and like there's like hundreds of footnotes, and then the footnotes pop out. It works on mobile, but it's much better on desktop. So all of the readings, there's like hundreds of like footnotes and all of the stuff there. And it's like, I always take it. It's always so nice when people reach out and they're like, I haven't seen your film, but like the syllabus is really cool. So that's like job, I'm like, I'm a happy camper with that. I think the key to reaching out to like the training stuff is like a lot of it is just like the timing, and you just try to find like media friendly events that they've done in the past. So like for the body camera training session, I, read this Baltimore Sun article that they were just starting out all these, the Baltimore Police Department was starting out with these cameras, and that they're going to be deploying them to police over the next year, and that they'd have to be training them, and like they had a photo essay about the class. And I was like, well, that's a lot of police officers who have to take that class. I bet they have to run that class a lot of times. And I saw a bunch of different stories that had sort of circled through the local news and stuff like that. So it was something that they had done before, and they had fielded that request before. So like when I'm reaching out, I'm always trying to like frame it in language that they've already used, and even to provide examples of like the type of shots that I would get. I'm just saying like, so for this, I reached out, I said, I'm working on a film about technology and images, and I think that it's so interesting that the Baltimore Police Department is embracing technology in this way. It was a slightly more nuanced than that, but I recently saw that you did this article on with the Baltimore Sun, and it would be so amazing to include this in this upcoming independent film. I'm an independent filmmaker with a very small, non-intrusive crew. Be willing to, I understand this is a very sensitive environment, and so we'd be willing to respect and work with you in any way possible. We want you to feel good about what we do together. Sincerely, Theo. And then that's like, you can sort of just take that, and I think like sort of those people are your friends to work with, and just like mirror, what they're giving you there. Sometimes it helps to play very small and dumb, and sometimes it helps to play like a little bit bigger than you are. So, but yeah, I think it's just like a lot of consider. And now it's just like, all that information's out there. It's just like all of these companies. But I will also say that was 2016, and I don't think I could have made this film in 2020. I think this was like still naive social media days a little bit. Before companies realized that they also had to be PR firms, like cranking out 24/7 PR content. And so I think I did also catch Axon at a unique stage of naivety. And so I don't think I can make this film again. But just keep trying for other places, and yeah.
Hi, my question is for during your editing, such as cutting out shots and keeping certain ones in, how do you refrain from providing like a certain type of narrative in these type of films?
Sorry, how do I refrain from providing a certain type of narrative? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand, sorry.
Like how do you stop yourself from creating a perspective using these clips when you're either choosing what to add in or what to keep out?
I think I'm constantly figuring out what my perspective is, actually. By what you're taking out as much as what you're putting in. I think probably a lot of editors in the room, you'll know that like editing is mostly like taking out and taking out and taking out. And I think that's how you really figure out what you're saying and what you're doing. And I think like the decisions, I think that, obviously you just saw the film, the ending, like what you leave out is just as important as what you leave in. I don't think I'm trying to escape a narrative or anything. I think like that's like the sort of, like one of the myths of documentary, that it's like a verite or objective point of view. It's always like a point of view, and I think there's someone making it. That doesn't mean like we should deconstruct it into like bottomless like relativism. Like it's just there is a truth there, but I think that we can't escape the fact that we're narrative machines. It's how we live our lives. It makes sense of the world. So embrace that process and try to do it ethically and responsibly. So.
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, Theo Anthony, and thank you so much for making such a thought-provoking and rich film. This film offers a kind of encounter with mediation that is so profound and it just excites you to investigate more. So thank you so much. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Carsey-Wolf Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure.
Yeah, no,
It's
thank you
such-
for
it's my pleasure.
giving such a attention to it. Yeah.